again with another episode of Don't Believe the Hype. I'm your host, Jay Sean. I'm excited for this one. I got my Wake Up Grumpy cup. And on this episode, we are going to dive in to some paranormal activity. It's going to be a good one, y'all. This episode is centered around the Perron family. This story was actually recreated as the 2013 film, The Conjuring, based on true events. Now, let me answer the question as to why me, a follower of Jesus, is covering paranormal activity like this, stories like this. Well, because some of you don't believe, some of you are non-believers, some of you don't believe in the spirit realm, or some of you aren't even religious, but you call yourself a spiritual person and you believe in spirituality in the spirit realm. Well, I think you should know what is going on in the spiritual realm, and it's something that we shouldn't take lightly, and you need to know what it is. And what better way than to hear it from the mouth of a bunch of skeptics now turned to believers. So that's why we're doing this story and many other stories after this, because these are really, really interesting stories, and I think it's going to wake up a lot of people. Now, before we get into all of that, I do want to say thank you for everyone that's tuning in and watching wherever you're watching from. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. Subscribing is a free way that you can support this channel, and it's one of my favorite ways to ask you. So with that being said, if you wish to support me and this channel, please consider subscribing. And last but not least, for those of you who do not know, I do make music. Now, I haven't released any music in almost a year, but I'm still cooking, I'm still making stuff, and I'm aiming for the New Year's to release a 5-song EP. So I'll leave a link in the description where you can go and check out all my songs. With that being said, let's get into today's podcast episode. This one is History of the Perron Family and the Harrisville Haunting. True story behind the movie The Conjuring. This is crazy, y'all. I low-key only slept about 2 hours. I think I was really excited about doing this. I couldn't sleep. Where should we start? The Harrisville Haunting. Seeking to move the children to acquire their home life in the country, Roger and Carolyn Perron purchased their home, their dream home, in the winter of 1970. The old Arnold estate was 200 acres in size and one of the original plantations in the area, surveyed by colonist John Smith in 1680 and deeded to Roger Williams for the formation of the state of Rhode Island. Located on Round Top Road in Harrisville, Rhode Island, the 10-room, lovely, charming country home was built in 1736 on a beautiful plot of land with plenty of room for their 5 children, all girls, to roam about and play. Nancy and Christine Perron shared one room, Cindy and April another, and Andrea had a room all to herself. I'm actually reading. So Andrea ended up actually writing a book going into deep detail about what happened, what led them to buying this home, and just all the details in between. And so far, it's really interesting. Andrea had a room all to herself, except on nights when, as Andrea put it, the sisters came crawling into bed with her, trembling and crying in terror. The parent family noticed something was amiss from the first day they stepped into their lovely new home. Later, it would be learned that 8 generations of families had lived and died in the old Arnold estate, including Mrs. John Arnold. Mrs. John Arnold, who at the age of 93 hung herself from the rafters of the barn. Sheesh. Other unfortunate losses of life on the estate included several suicides, hangings, poisonings, the rape and unsolved murder of 11-year-old girl Prudence Arnold, later presumed to have been murdered by a farm hand, 2 sudden drownings in the creek located near the house, and 4 men who mysteriously froze to death on the land. It did not take long before the parents understood why the previous seller advised them on the day that they moved into the house. For the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. Jeez, if someone would ever tell me that before I bought a home, I'd be like, yo, hold on. Wait a minute. You have to take this back. I'm straight. At first, the ghosts, or demon spirits, as the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren thought of them, were harmless. Described variously as opaque or somewhat solid in appearance. I probably butchered that word. There were many spirits present in the old homestead. One ghost smelled of flowers, while another would gently kiss the girls goodnight in their beds every night. Another appeared to be a small, young male the girls would watch, mesmerized, push toy cars around about the room, propelled by an invisible hand. One apparition, presumably a female ghost, was a welcome presence in the home. The parents would often hear sweeping noises coming from the kitchen. When they entered the room, they would find the broom had been moved to a different spot in the room, with a neat pile of newly swept dirt sitting in the middle of the floor, waiting to be deposited in the trash can. That is crazy. Manny was another spirit that the young parent children loved. Manny was believed to be the spirit of Johnny Arnold, who had committed suicide by hanging himself in the attic of the house in the 1700s. Manny would appear before the children, often standing nearby quietly, watching the children go about their daily activities, a crooked smile on his face, amused at the children's play. If eye contact were made with Manny, he would withdraw from sight just as suddenly as he had appeared. In addition to ghostly entities, the parents say they witnessed many other odd and unexplained phenomena. Beds would levitate several inches off the floor. Telephone handsets would hover in the air and slam down onto the phone base when someone entered the room, and various household objects would glide about the house on their own. Often chairs would be pulled suddenly from beneath an unexpected guest and pictures would tumble from the walls. The parents once reported seeing orange ooze blood and a wall dissolve into nothingness. Some spirits, aka demons, were not so nice to the parent family. Not all the ghosts at Harrisville were welcome visitors. Some would yank the girl's legs and hair during the middle of the night. Others would loudly bang the front door of the home with such force that the entire house would shake. Doors would slam shut on their own, while others would stay frozen in place, unable to be shut no matter how much force was applied to them. One entity in the home routinely kept the family awake as it continually cried out in the night, "Mama, Mama," while another apparition tortured 8-year-old Cindy, telling her over and over, "There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall." One of the parents recalled a small, delicate spirit, appearing to be about 4 years old, roaming the house crying, calling for her mother. One of the spirits was so evil, the parent family to this day will not disclose what it did to them. Andrea Perrin, who authored a book about their experiences in the home, House of Darkness, House of Light, and that's the book that I'm reading, hinted that the unmentionable spirit may have molested some of the girls. When asked about this spirit during an interview, she avoided the question, telling the reporter, "Let's just say there was a very bad male spirit in the home with 5 little girls." Wow, that's nuts. The baddest ghost of them all, Bathsheba Sherman. The most horrid ghost in the home targeted Miss Perrin specifically. The entity was thought to have been the ghost of Bathsheba Sherman, a practicing Satanist and witch who had lived in the home in the early 19th century and died there after hanging herself from a tree behind the barn. The parents were not a religious family. Weak in faith, it was theorized to be a primary factor for the particularly violent and active nature of Bathsheba's treatment of the parent family. Credence to this theory is strengthened when it was learned that the only previous resident not to report any odd occurrences was a local minister. Lorraine Warren explained this was important. "You only have your faith as your protection. I always had my faith. God protected me, allowed me to do this. At that particular time, the parents did not have religion, and it was very dangerous." I really hope you guys paid attention to that part. Bathsheba Sherman was a vile, hideous creature described as having a face similar to a desiccated beehive, covered in cobwebs with no real human features other than vermin crawling from crevices etched into the wrinkled skin of her face. Her head, round and gray, sat leaning off to one side as if her neck had been broken, and an evil stench permeated the room when she was present. Sheesh. The details of this woman, y'all, it's crazy. Bathsheba Thayer was born in 1812 in Rhode Island and married fellow Rhode Islander Judson Sherman on March 10, 1844. When alive, Bathsheba had lived a life of solitude, an outcast of the community she lived in after being accused of killing her young baby as a sacrifice to Satan. The baby's body was found to have been impaled in the head with a sharp object. Lacking evidence, the case was eventually dropped. Bathsheba was believed to have had 3 other children, none of whom survived past the age of 4. Her children may not have been her only victims. Bathsheba Sherman was also known to have brutalized the staff, often starving and beating them for minor infractions. It was easily recognized that Bathsheba had her favorites in the household. She tortured Carolyn Perrin. One of the daughters, Cindy, was often a frequent target, while lusting after Mr. Perrin. During their stay, equipment in the home frequently broke. Roger Perrin would take the broken machinery down to the cellar to repair. While working, he often felt Bathsheba touching him, gently caressing his neck or running her hands down his back. But while longing for Mr. Perrin, Bathsheba abhorred Carolyn. It was clear that Bathsheba wanted Carolyn out of the house. An August 1977 article in the local Providence Journal described the appearance of Bathsheba Sherman. Mrs. Perrin said she awake before dawn one morning to find an apparition by her bed, the head of an old woman hanging off to one side over an old gray dress. There was a voice reverberating, "Get out, get out. I'll drive you out with death and gloom." Wow, what a creepy sight to see, to witness. An old woman with a wrinkly face with a gown on and her head tilted off to the side, and a really, really bad stench that followed. In the beginning, Bathsheba's treatment of Carolyn was merely cruel. Carolyn would be pinched, slapped, or have objects thrown about her. Her greatest fear, fire, was soon discovered by the entity and used repeatedly to strike terror in her, as Bathsheba banged torches against her head while demanding that she leave the home immediately. As time progressed, the attacks grew harsher. In one instance, Carolyn was lying on the couch when she felt a sharp pain in the calf of her leg. She examined her leg and found a large, bleeding puncture wound that looked as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. Later, after threats failed to motivate Carolyn to leave, Bathsheba took a different tack and attempted to invade Carolyn from within. Believing that Carolyn had been possessed, the parents called in psychic investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren to assist them. Ed and Lorraine Warren are often thought of as the original paranormal investigators. For decades, they had helped investigate hauntings and demonic possessions across the country. In many of their cases, they were able to convince the Vatican to provide exorcisms of the spirits that they found. The parents heard of the Warrens after one of their many public speaking engagements and pleaded with them to help save their mother. By this time, it was believed that Bathsheba has physically possessed Carolyn Perrin, an assessment that Ed Warren could not disagree with. Daughter Andrea Perrin remembered the night the exorcism took place. The night I thought I saw my mother die was the most terrifying night of all. She spoke in a voice we had never heard before, and the power not of this world threw her 20 feet into another room. Unfortunately, the true story of the Perrin family's haunting ended differently than the Conjuring movie portrayed. In reality, the Warrens were not successful in ridding the Perrin family of their hell-bent tormentors. Wow. Well, I'm glad they added a happy ending in The Conjuring. The Warrens were not successful in ridding the Perrin family of their hell-bent tormentors. Carolyn Perrin recalled that dreadful night and explained that even though the Warrens' intentions were good, they essentially found that things got worse around them. As the situation spun out of control, Roger Perrin demanded that the Warrens leave the premises immediately. The only religious believers, and you tell them to leave. Man. It's a great day to be a believer. The parents soon learned that every occupant, with the exception of a local minister and his family, of the old Arnold estate had reported supernatural phenomena on the homestead. In fact, the owner just prior to the parents had hired a contractor to renovate the house. The contractor had been busily renovating the home when he suddenly stopped work and fled. It was reported that he had left the home screaming, leaving behind his tools and his car. Dang. The owners never moved in, and the home sat vacant for several years before the parents discovered it was on the market. Despite their unfortunate circumstances, financial constraints kept the parents rooted in place for 10 long years. Unable to flee, they endured the inconvenience of the friendly spirits and the torture malevolent ghosts bestowed upon them. Finally, in 1980, at the insistence of Carolyn, the parents were financially able to vacate the home. They moved to Georgia. Wow. Andrea Perrin wrote a book of their experiences in the home, House of Darkness, House of Light. She tours the country giving lectures and recollections of her time in the haunted home. Yo, I would love to get this lady on a podcast and have her speak on this. Current owners of the Harrisville haunted house. According to Andrea Perrin, the current owner, Norma Sutcliffe, who purchased the home in 1983, stated that she, her husband Gary, and various visitors to the home have had paranormal experiences in the farmhouse, including the door banging in the front hall, sounds of people talking in another room, the sounds of footsteps scurrying around the house, and one odd instance when her husband's chair began vibrating in the study room. They claim to have also witnessed a glowing blue light shoot across the bedroom, fog floating through the rooms of the home, and vibrations in the walls so intense they felt the house was going to come apart. Several visitors to their home have independently reported seeing an elderly woman, hair in a bun, moving silently throughout the house. That is freaking creepy. And I don't understand why they kicked out Ed and Lorraine Warren, the only people who could have possibly helped in that situation. And see, this is what I mean. Like, people who aren't religious, like, one of Satan's biggest strategies and schemes is to get you to believe that he doesn't exist. Because if you don't believe that he exists, that's when he can come in and he can do whatever he wants in your life, and you're oblivious to the idea or the fact that all the turmoil that you're experiencing is due to demonic activity. This family now, I'm sure they would tell you, yo, this stuff is real. For those of you who don't believe, this stuff is real. It's really happening. You play with Ouija boards, you play with tarot cards and crystals. You open up doors to the demonic. You're not this none of this stuff is of God. This is all demonic activity that appears to be good. And when you give the devil a little wiggle room, that boy gonna try to take the whole thing over. That is so crazy. They weren't believers at all. And I mean, the guy who stayed there before them was a minister, and he experienced nothing. Nothing whatsoever. That has to make you think. It has to strike something in you. Like, this stuff is real. What do you believe in? You can't, like, how can you say you just don't believe in God? You don't believe in devils, you don't believe in demons, you don't believe in the spiritual world. Or how can you say that you're a spiritual person but you don't believe in any of that stuff? I'm a spiritual person, but I don't believe in God. Like, go and talk to this family. I mean, I would encourage everyone to read Andrea's book that she wrote. I think she wrote 3 volumes of the book talking about this. And these pictures, creepy. Like this picture of Bathsheba just staring out in the open. That's what? What would it take for you to believe? What would it take for you to take your life seriously? All this family wanted to do was live in their dream home. They didn't want this stuff. They didn't want any of that. Carolyn, she didn't want to be possessed. The kids, they didn't want to be tormented, kept awake, freaked out, completely freaked out of the mind, attacked, bullied. Like Lorraine Warren said, you only have your faith as your protection. If you don't have faith, what do you really have? What is your protection? What is your protection? What's protecting you from the spiritual reality? What's protecting you from the evil that's in the world? I listened to an interview with I think his name was Michael Knowles, and he interviewed a priest who performed exorcisms before. And man, he was talking about a lot of the stuff that I've talked about in previous videos. One of the things he said blew my mind. He said there's more people dying in the womb every day than there is people dying outside of the womb every day. And he said that there are witches, people like Bathsheba, who pay for these women to get abortions, and they ask to be there because since they paid for it, it's like they're giving an offering to Satan. He also said that I think a week before Halloween that over 100 homeless people go missing, and it's all due to human sacrificing. Like, this stuff is really, really happening. And I want you who maybe you don't believe in this stuff, or maybe you do, but you're 1 foot in and you're 1 foot out. Like, you call yourself a follower of Jesus, but you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Like, I want you to understand how serious this is. That this is nothing to play around with. Being a Christian and dabbling with Ouija boards and tarot cards and crystals, like you're inviting the devil in. You're inviting him in. You're opening up a door for him to come in, and you're playing with your life. And you shouldn't do that. The parent family, who are a bunch of skeptics, would be the first ones to tell you, and they weren't religious at all, but they'd be the first ones to tell you, you should not play with your life like that. You invite these things in, they will come. They're just waiting. They're just like, think about it. Like, the Bible says that Satan is the prince of this world. He's the prince of this world. The things that he used to do used to be so subtle. Now it's right in our faces. It's right in our faces. Everywhere. You can't deny that this dude is like right in our faces. And obviously we know that his time is coming to an end. So he's trying to take as many people to hell with him as he can. So I want you to understand what he's paying attention to, who he's paying attention to. You play with his game. You play in his game. He's for sure paying attention to you. When you dabble in Christians and you dabble in New Ageism, and you start doing what the pagans did back in the day, he's definitely paying attention to you. There's a story of a woman who she wanted to be famous so bad, and she told everybody, I want to be famous. I want to be famous. Well, guess who's listening to that? So she has a dream. And in this dream, I guess she's offered that lifestyle from Satan. And she pretty much agrees to it. And he ends up writing a contract. And he slices her finger and has her sign in blood. And when she signs in blood, the contract burns up. She ends up waking up, and next to her bed are the ashes from the contract. And before you know it, she's famous, a well-known singer, and she's living the life that she's always wanted, right? Well, eventually, it starts to go downhill for her, and she starts to become addicted to drugs, and just completely thrown off, of course, and really just taking a really bad fall. And she ends up hospitalized, like she's dying now. She tells a minister to help her, and they call and they come and perform an exorcism. um, when I guess she gave the details of the deal that she made with Satan, the guy who's going to do the priest or the exorcist was telling her, well, I can't perform an exorcist because you're in covenant with the devil. So what you're going to do is you're going to write up a contract and you're going to sign it in blood and you're going to get out of contract with him. And so she did that. She wrote up a contract of all the terms and everything. She wrote it down, signed it in blood, and then she started convulsing and then she flatlined and died. Her family is hysterical now. Everyone's just like, what the heck? And they're pissed off at the minister because they're just like, dude, what did you do? What did you make her do? She's dead. Well, eventually she ends up coming alive and she's like gasping for air. And so during this time she was tested and she had HIV. So when she came back alive, doctors tested her and she didn't have HIV anymore. Everything that she was plagued with was now miraculously gone. So this stuff is real. This stuff is real and it's nothing to be playing with. I knew a lady back in the day when I was a teenager. She told me a story of when she was pregnant with her daughter and her and her friends decided to play with a Ouija board and they were playing with it. And a week after they played that Ouija board, she was shot in her arm. She got shot in her arm while pregnant. Thank God the baby wasn't harmed and thank God the mother wasn't harmed. Like, it could have been a lot worse, but she got shot in her arm. I'm sure there are many other cases of people playing with Ouija boards and weird things happening following that moment. How much more do you need to be convinced of this reality? That this world is a lot more spiritual than some of you think it is. And when you dabble in the occult, you are opening up doors for the demonic to come in. Yeah, man. Really interesting story. There's a ton of stories just like this. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they have a whole case file of tons of other paranormal investigations that they've been involved in. Like the story of Annabelle, the haunting in Connecticut, the Amityville horror, all those movies that we know of were actually based on true events. And I think I want to get into those articles so you guys can see and hopefully they can convince you of the spiritual reality that we're in. So, again, I thank you guys for watching and I'll see you guys for the next episode. All right, I'm out. Peace.